Bethel U series, we are exploring different ways to deal with this new reality. One of those ways is to pay attention to our mental health. So for our first session, I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Naomi Bartley, who will speak on optimism, faith, and the climate crisis. Naomi is a licensed professional clinical counselor in the state of Minnesota and a climate-aware therapist recognized by the Climate Psychology Alliance North America. She is a climate reality leader and mentor with the Climate Reality Leadership Corp and serves her community as a grief and trauma specialist, water protector, environmental advocate, speaker, and consultant in related areas. She'll be sharing some online resources throughout her talk, so if you'd prefer to receive an email with those links, there's a sign-up sheet at the back, right back there. Please help me welcome Naomi.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really great to be here, and I'm seeing some familiar faces. Hi, Karna. So good to see you. We went to St. Olaf together, and wow. How to get here, right? Okay, so I'm Naomi Monsager Bartley, and Cynthia did a really lovely job of introducing me. Thank you. So helpful. I'm an introvert, so I did that on purpose. Believe it or not, I'm really happy to be here and be extroverting. This subject is really near and dear to my heart, as hopefully all of you who are here are either questioning, wondering, and have some emotional investment. I am a therapist, so I do emotions. I did request a box of Kleenex be set here. You can't hear? Still can't? Is this better? Okay, I'm sorry. I really am not used to speaking in a microphone. When I yell, it's at my son, and it's a very different kind of voice. So I don't think I should use that kind of voice here, but I will try to vocalize, access my vagus nerve, use that. Anyway, I would like to jump right in. I think one of the things that Cynthia didn't mention, which I added to my slide, is I am what I personally call an ecological fitness practitioner, and that will be part of my conversation today. I would love to hear some of your thoughts if we have some time for questions and conversation later. Okay, I'd like to begin today doing something I did not grow up doing. I grew up in a very Stoic Scandinavian Lutheran family, and over time I have learned to really celebrate being embodied, being incarnate. And actually I found it really quite necessary as we enter into a whole new era of living in a world amidst climate change. So I'm going to invite you, not require, but I'm going to invite you to either stand or sit up in your chair with your hips, shoulders, and ears aligned. If you can engage what we call your core muscles, your abdomen, squeeze your butt. And I'd like you to take a deep breath in all the way in, down into your lower abdomen. I'm going to do a salutation. I don't know if any of you have ever felt like you want to raise your hand in church, or both of them. Oh, come on, you have. I know I have, but have felt very inhibited because of my background. But a salutation basically is we are extending our energy. We are extending ourselves and inviting God's energy into our lives and into our hearts and into our bodies as we exchange in communication with our bodies and our energies. So let's go ahead and do a salutation. You can do it in your chair. You can stand up. And breathe. Look up. And release. Okay, thank you. Some of you who like to talk might be saying, where's the prayer? We just did it. Okay, so I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. what brings you here? I really want to know, but we don't have time to go into a full discussion right now. I do strongly encourage you to talk with one another if you haven't. It sounds like this congregation does have conversations regarding this topic frequently. I understand there are some older, younger kids here. I don't even know what to call sixth graders in terms of where they are in their development, because you're just coming into adulthood. And so I'd like you too to really think about, what's your story? You don't need to know every detail as you're growing into who you are, but why are you here? Our values and our beliefs inform how we regard the world and our individual lives. Many of you share a belief system here, I'm gathering. And how do those beliefs inform what you think about and feel about this experience of climate change? These are some stories I at least have been exposed to over my lifetime and in more recent years with my 9-year-old son. Some of you may find these are familiar. And I don't know why this one in the middle is blocked off, because it's one of my favorites. It's the Avengers, and Robert Downey Jr. is right in the middle of the screen. But we have common myths, common stories over time, over centuries, millennia, in terms of our relationship with energies that feel threatening. Star Wars, right? The dark side, the Force, good and evil, love, the absence of love, death. I don't know. We'll be talking about that. Okay, this is one of my favorite scenes, and I'll just reveal a little bit about my personal story. Do I keep walking in front of you so you can't see the screen? I'm sorry. This is a scene from Lord of the Rings. Some of you may be familiar with that story. This image here is Arwen on her horse at the river, crossing the threshold over to safety. And you see the stream has become a river of raging horses. As a water protector, I love this scene. That's power. That's Mother Nature. That's energy. And that's energy that Arwen is friends with. Some of you who may be Scandinavian may be familiar with Yggdrasil, our tree of life image. Odin rules over this tree, over this world. I also happen to be Jungian. Carl Jung is a Swiss psychiatrist, and many of you probably are familiar with at least some of his thoughts, if not his work. And in Jungian work, when we do therapy, we consider that our inner world is a reflection of our outer world, and our outer world is a reflection of our inner world. As the saying goes, as above, so below. So if we imagine traveling from the treetop of the tree of life all the way down to the roots, Carl Jung would say the roots reach all the way down to hell. And if we don't go all the way down to hell, we don't get to experience the growth of the treetop. Sound like fun, huh? It is an adventure. Some of you may be here precisely because of a fear of hell. I have sat with many clients, colleagues, friends, family, my own soul, in tears, most recently after watching Don't Look Up. Tears, water works the whole darn time. So I don't stand up here pretending to have it all figured out or like I've got it all together. But I will say that distress and despair may be motivating us to be here together today. Distress, meaning feeling the threat of climate change, where we're experiencing a lot of emotions. We don't know where to put them or what to do with them. They're very common. Doesn't help that they're common. Still hurts. What we worry about, and I'm going to step out on a limb here as a Christian. I was raised by a bunch of Lutheran pastors. And so I will claim some authority in my own faith that despair is a sin. And what I mean by sin is we're missing the mark when we go down the road of despair. It's human. Despair basically is our attitude about our existence. An existential crisis or a dread, it can be clinically described as a persistence of negative feelings, where we ask, what is the point? Why bother? Nothing's going to change, nothing's going to improve. So I'm here to maybe raise some awareness that you haven't considered. Maybe you have, and I'm here to remind you. And also hopefully bring a little bit of hope. Awareness is important. It serves a lot of functions. I've listed some here. We are threatened by crisis change, and it can feel extremely overwhelming. But if we're not aware of those kinds of feelings, then we can't meet the challenge. We do things like we deny the problem or we avoid it. Believe it or not, a lot of people are afraid of their feelings. So if we're afraid of our feelings, we're going to do a lot of avoidance of really big challenges and issues. If we get burnt out, either because we're feeling too much or we're not feeling at all or we're not acknowledging our feelings, we're not going to be able to function well in our everyday lives. And this is true whether climate change is happening or not. We have emotions, God knows why, but we have them. So they've got to be important. It's also important that we reconcile with some of these harder emotions so that we can stay engaged with the environment, with our ecology. We want to empower efforts that we're making as a species, as a human species, toward reducing a very real threat. And then we need to make adaptations. And I know there are biases about this, and I have one, and that is we need to adapt. And that might sound scary, and as I age, adaptation becomes more and more and more difficult. And at the same time, when I do engage in necessary changes, I'm relieved once I'm on the other side, because I'm much better able to handle adversity, changes, requests from my 9-year-old. Like, what is Minecraft? The good thing about Minecraft, actually, I will add, is he learns about biomes. That's cool. So anyway, so we begin to make adaptations, we build resilience, and I'll be talking about resilience here. And if someone wouldn't mind letting me know about the time, I'm going to ramble. Karna, do you mind kind of keeping me posted? Thanks. So we do have some terminology that's developed out of the climate crisis. One is eco-anxiety. Clinically, we're recognizing this as a thing. It's essentially extreme worry about current and future harm to the environment caused by human activity and climate change. Ecological grief, and I've seen a lot of this in my work. Grief experienced due to endured or anticipated ecological losses, the disruption of environmental knowledge, and the loss of place-based identity. due to environmental change. And then solastalgia is similar to the last part of ecological grief. It's an emerging form of depression or distress caused by environmental change, where essentially when you're displaced, you feel sadness and start to lose a sense of your identity about the change in the place that you identified with. It's basically security relating to where we live. And we are seeing that with disaster after disaster after disaster. Most of us are fairly, and I say most with, I guess, quite a bit of qualification, isolated, or I should say protected from some of those extremes, at least in this region for now. That's not going to last, which is one of the reasons we need to be mindful about making adaptations and be willing to look at the hard stuff. That's why I love Arwen so much. She's just like, bring it on, bring it on. If I were to tell the younger generation, you got to step into your warrior. I'm not kidding, and that's very not my background. But I will say having a hero archetype to step into can be really helpful in accessing the kind of energy that we need to be able to step up and be present to the reality of what's happening with the climate. We also have to be smart. So I will say, I also know something about smart people, not because I am so smart. I'm happy with my intelligence, don't get me wrong. But I know some really smart people. And I think all of you are among them. You're here. And what I mean by smart people is people who are willing to face the truth, adapt, look at these realities in life, and still have hope. But it's important that we understand what we mean by hope. Some of you may or may not have appreciated Barack Obama, but his message was audacious hope. It still is. He continues to talk about hope, even though George Floyd gets killed and every other person who's murdered, even though the sky is falling. So that's confusing because what's hope? Well, hope isn't, I hope, one of the hopes I had when I was a little kid was I would come home and there would be popsicles in the freezer. I'm not kidding. Like you get the sunflower or the, what is that, dandelion seed. And you get it and you get to make a wish. One of my wishes was I'd get home, there'd be popsicles in the freezer. No. No popsicles in the freezer. All those disappointments. But I kept wishing for popsicles, and I still liked popsicles. I still like popsicles. They're bright, they're colorful, they're cold. Cold is actually really good for you. That's another story. They're yummy, especially the fruit-based ones. That's the mom in me. One day I was going to have popsicles in my freezer, and guess what? I have popsicles in my freezer. It's really about your attitude and your lifestyle. I live a hopeful lifestyle. Doesn't mean something's going to happen that I want to have happen. It means I believe in this energy of hope. I choose to believe in this energy of hope. I choose to believe it. That's my belief. Those seeds were planted a long time ago. I'm very grateful for that. But they've grown into something very different than what my child mind thought it was. So many of you may be familiar with Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Highly recommend it. You don't have to be a therapist to appreciate his message. Asking and exploring life meaning, belief, values, attitudes, reconciling with mortality. People are afraid of death in the West. I don't want to go through dying. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to suffer. But I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know. I have no right to be afraid of it. I don't know what's going on over there. I have some ideas. I can choose to believe. And I'm going to preach a little bit. I think God, the universe, the higher power is saying, hey, there's something a lot bigger than you. There's a mystery out here you don't know about. I can send you a few signs that point the way. That's part of our reconciling with our mortality is we're not going to have all the answers to our questions. And these bodies that we are in right now will stop working. So turning to Mother Nature for answers. The life-death life cycle. In some ways, it's very sad. For those of you who have experienced facing your own mortality right there, who have lost loved ones, have witnessed people, have witnessed everything that's happening around the globe with your heart open and with prayers. We see this life-death cycle. But the life-death life cycle is the resurrection. That is the promise. And Mother Nature shows us that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. What is the deal with our one-sided relationship with Mother Nature? That's one of my angry therapist questions. If you don't know what a one-sided relationship is, call me. I will tell you all about it. How do we relate to ourselves? How do we relate to people we love? How do we relate to the planet? This is key. I am telling you, this is key. We can't walk around on the planet anymore like we're entitled and this is just for us. We're stewards of the planet. That means we take care of the planet. We work with Mother Earth. Okay, I'm not going to read this whole poem, but many of you may be familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh. He recently passed away. I haven't cried for a while when a public figure died, but when he died, I cried instantly. He has been a spirit guide for me over the years. Vietnamese Buddhist monk living in Plum Village in France, followed by millions. And he wrote this beautiful poem about death. And I will say, basically, it's a conversation between Mother Earth and death. And death is saying, you should be afraid of me. I'm here to get you. And Mother Earth is basically saying, oh, touch me. I'm not afraid. When you are afraid, touch me. This is what I recommend. I see these young faces. I see your beautiful faces. And I feel tearful. And I will say, this is a truth. That it is very healing to relate to Mother Earth. If you don't get outside in nature, even when it's super cold, you're missing an opportunity to hear Mother Earth comfort, and she will. She will. We need to be able to listen and feel, and sometimes we listen by touching, by using our bodies differently. It's not always auditory, the way that we listen. So there are efforts and movements to address the psychology of climate change. As Cynthia graciously introduced me, she mentioned I'm part of the Climate Psychology Alliance. Thank you, Karna. North America, and there is a global alliance. And essentially, it's this movement to support one another, support everyone, all of us together, coming together in community, saying, this is hard, and we are going to do it together. We're going to step up and love each other and comfort and cry and be angry and feel like we're going to collapse and get back up again. And we're going to do it together. There are models. There are lots of fancy models. We love models in psychology, especially for teachers. Transformational resilience is one, and it's a really good one. I really like it because instead of talking about resilience as bouncing back, which is lovely, it's great to bounce back. And originally, that's kind of what we had meant by resilience. But transformational resilience means we don't just bounce back, we like get better. Can you believe that? While we're dealing with climate change, we're actually getting better. We're getting our warrior on. I feel like Tony Robbins, which is really weird. I mean, he's not weird. I just feel weird being like him. Anyway, okay, so essentially the goal of transformational resilience is a preventative kind of approach, community-based, where we think about healthy ways and ongoing unhealthy conditions. And we use adversities as catalysts for our transformation and our community transformation. And as a way to stay involved in what's happening with climate change. It's really easy to stick our heads in the sand. I mean, I want to a lot. This is hard. It's really hard, and we're doing it. Okay, so we use this term good enough mother. Those of you who are parents, hopefully you know this idea of being a good enough parent, right? We don't have to be perfect, we can't. And our kiddos are still gonna thrive and be okay even if we're not doing it 100%. Right? Okay, so this is my favorite part because this is my model. And I call it my model because it's the way I've put together how I understand myself in this ecological disruption. And I call it ecological fitness. After the death, killing, murder, however you want to describe it for your own psyche, of George Floyd, and seeing it over and 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 over again, not to mention the other killings amidst climate change and COVID, I hit a wall. And if I weren't in a sanctuary, I might even swear. Anyway, my son, I can hear his voice, Mama. And I shut off the television. I said, I cannot do death anymore. I cannot do grief and trauma anymore. I'm a grief and trauma therapist. And I turned on BBC and I turned on those goofy, silly murder mysteries. I said, I'm watching this, I'm not watching CNN. I have not gone back to CNN. How much time do I have, Carta? Okay, and I have to be done when? Okay, do we want to do questions and stuff? You are? Okay, all right. Then I'm not going to tell you the story about the hot guy I saw on the show that made me go, I need to do fitness. But anyway, so I just told you. My first career out of college, graduating from St. Olaf, Umyaya, was as an aquatic fitness coordinator at the Minneapolis Uptown YWCA. My first career was in fitness and swimming. Tell Bob that. I was not competitive, though. Don't tell him that. Anyway, I remembered this, that, wow, I actually like being in my body. I like moving my body. I like the mechanics of my body. I like fitness. And I had never really claimed that as part of my identity. I've always done it, but it's like, and then the more I thought about it, the more things came into my window that confirmed this for me, including how to go vegan. We eat lutefisk in my family. We eat lutefisk in my family, which means going vegan isn't going to fly at Christmas. But I will say, when I decided to do that, I did it, which was also really strange because I thought for years and years I should be vegetarian, I should be vegetarian, I should, and just couldn't make the shift. It's really hard to do behavior change. It is. It's just part of being human. When I made that change, though, something in me lined up and I became more congruent with myself, meaning big S, my essence, who I've been in there all along. I'm still flabbergasted by it, even though I do this for a living. I do help people with their transformational journey, and I see it happen, and it's amazing. And there's nothing really that magical in terms of understanding it. We all know about holistic thinking, body, mind, spirit. I add heart and planet to the way I think about holistic health. And I add heart because I think it's very easy to skip our emotional world when we talk about mind. We can get into mindfulness, we can do meditation, we can become unattached to suffering, apparently. That's what Thich Nhat Hanh said. I've never really been able to do that very well. But essentially, when we think ecologically, we understand that we're all systems interconnected, all the way down to our tiniest little itsy bitsy cells. Every little thing is a system. Even if we're in chaos, there's always order in there somewhere or out there. These are some words that come to mind: interconnected, integrated, transformational, embodied, dynamic, self-making. That one is particularly important. And if I were to plant a seed to the younger people here, and I'm so glad that you're here, I would say you are agents of your own lives. I know you got to listen to your parents. That's important too. But you're creating your interior, your self-making, and we do that for the rest of our lives. So you might as well start, because you're going to be doing it for a long time. And it's good to get good at it, because new things present themselves all the time. And then we want to be able to say, do I want to take that in and weave that into who I am? Maybe, yeah, that fits. Or maybe something's just really not me. It is not me to be an activist. I am not going to go with a picket line in front of the White House and march and scream. I'm not going to do that, but I appreciate the people who do. I'll write a letter, something a little quieter, or come to a church and talk to nice people. So the existential question that I hear a lot, and I have had myself, is, well, so what if we all die? You know, what if, like, the end of the world happens? That's horrible. That's going to hurt. I don't want that. That's not what I want. Well, apprehending our place in the universe is very humbling. God cares about what we want, and God doesn't really care about what we want. The universe doesn't really care about what our little ego wants. The universe is love, and the universe loves us, and we are part of the universe. And here I'm going to quote Carl Jung: the whole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Sounds kind of mystical and Christian. But if we're all light, and our job is to become the light that we are, that light's not ever going to go out. We just don't know that yet in our little brains, in our bodies that feel afraid. If you did see Don't Look Up, and I don't necessarily recommend it for everybody, depending on your level of anxiety around this issue. I actually just told a client to not watch it because of her level of anxiety right now. But the end scene actually is really beautiful. It is a reflection of the archetype of the Last Supper, of our meal together. And that's how we do this. That's how we do this together. Loving one another, loving ourselves, loving the planet. And if we get that, then we can start putting the bells and whistles on with all our strategies and fun stuff. And what weapons do we want to use as warriors? And what am I going to wear? I'm like, I put on my Scandinavian armor today. I've got my Celia, my grandma. She would be proud. I've got my ancestors behind me. I kid you not. And I've got Karna helping me. So I will just quickly say as we're wrapping up that there is a whole community. None of you are alone in this. You might feel isolated. And if you do, I encourage you to reach out. I encourage you to identify resources. I've listed some here and I've given a list to Cynthia. There are many, many more out there, resources. I just identified a few that I have found to be powerful because they lead you to other sources pretty quickly. Climate Mama, if there are any parents or grandparents out there who are wondering, how do I talk to my kiddos about this? Harriet Sugarman is a good friend of mine, and she has a beautiful website and a book, How to Talk to Your Kids About Climate Change. I'd encourage you to go to her website. I am a local resource. I currently have developed a new platform for education, speaking, training called River Tree. I'm on Instagram and I'll be building a website. I'm in process. River Tree, by the way, is my project that is saving me. Meaning I had to find a way to bring myself to this work without losing myself. And being only a grief and trauma therapist, I'm sorry, but that cute guy in that show, I can't just do grief and trauma anymore. And it's not just because of him, it's what the archetype of this strong, healthy looking man solving murders. Some of you might know who I'm talking about. It's like, yeah, I need to up my game a little bit. I need something that gives me some energy so that I can be more present to this important work. We also have our wonderful, beautiful Northfield Grief Support Coalition. And I think Bethel's a member? Yeah? No? Maybe? Yes, I hope so. If not, we still get to use them no matter where we are. And Sarah Lippert is wonderful and lovely. And here's some other climate advocacy organizations. I will, once I figure out the technology, happily send my presentation to Cynthia, and so you can just have that as a resource here to link on to some of these sites. Okay, well, thank you for being gracious and receiving me. Being received is really powerful and deeply important to all of us, and this is a hard topic, and there is a really beautiful presence here with all of you today, and I feel privileged to be here, and thank you. Are there questions, or do we need to be done? Comments. I mean, we got a room full of wisdom here.
It appears that much of what you're promoting is self-centered, and I think it should be God-centered.
What is your name? Thank you, Noel. I appreciate that. Noel said that what I was saying was mostly self-centered, and he said it should be God-centered, and I think I really appreciate your point. What you are experiencing from me personally is having been out in the field of advocacy. And so I think my presentation is a little biased toward how do we bring ourselves into this field. It's also very psychological, and I think I can miss the point. I certainly didn't mean to diminish God or exclude God. I kind of walk now with an assumption everything I do is about God, and I don't think I should make that assumption. I really appreciate the comment. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
She gives 4 reasons why she's really encouraged about the hope for the future of the climate. Can you tell us, quick? Yeah, sure. Thanks. I recently read a book called The Book of Hope. I don't know if any of you have read that, by Jane Goodall, but it's an amazing book that gives kind of 4 of her main reasons that she has hope for the future of our climate, of our world. And so I would strongly recommend that as being like a positive, encouraging thing when you're speaking about hope. So, yeah.
If anyone's looking for a role model, Jane Goodall is a wonderful role model. Thank you for bringing that up. I wish I had more time because there are so many really beautiful souls out there who are talking about God first and who are very experienced, like Jane Goodall, bringing their wisdom forward. So thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
I just wondered if you might talk about solastalgia and thinking about the multifaceted layers of depression that young people face today. What are some strategies you've used in working with young adults, especially, to tap into that, to unpack it, so that they can feel seen and heard together?
What's your name? Hera? Thank you. Yes, the occurrence of depression is skyrocketing among especially young adults and the younger generations. And one strategy I would say is doing group work, getting together in groups. And the kind of depression that we're seeing, a lot of it is rather clinical. And so I would also say it's important to engage or employ, meaning get involved, professionals who do work with depression. I talk about being embodied, and I actually, that's an object lesson today. That a lot of the trauma and grief work we do is called embodied and somatic work. And we can control that. And I know that is self-centered, but we are embodied, we are incarnate, we are. And that's not mutually exclusive from God. If we are in touch with our bodies and our physiology and recognizing what the symptoms are of depression. What are the symptoms of depression? Tearfulness, low energy, can't think. Some are suicidal, some are despondent, some feel despair. You know how we recognize we have these emotions? What's going on in our physiology? If we're not paying attention to what's happening in our physiology, we're not going to get on top of what that emotional experience is. So I encourage yoga for the kiddos. I encourage physical exercise. I encourage making sure you're getting your nutrition. Nutrition is huge in terms of mood. And that's a whole nother talk I would be happy to give or to provide resources on. And I know that sounds kind of basic, but it's actually where we're going in terms of research. There are people who work somatically. If I were working with these kids, I would have them identify where in their body they're experiencing their feelings. Parents can do this. You can do this with your kids. I'm feeling it in my stomach. Okay, breathe deeply into your stomach. Sit up. Engage your core muscles. When we feel strong in our bodies, we feel less vulnerable. I kid you not, there's research on that. Anybody who's been sick, you know that when you feel sick, you're like, oh, I'm going to get hurt if I get out of bed. So building strong bodies really matters. You did mention levels of depression. I'm not quite sure if you meant like kind of more cyclothymia or getting all the way down to being suicidal. If someone is suicidal, then we have to intervene a little more aggressively. And that may mean a crisis intervention. It may mean hospitalization. I mean, they're very individual questions, and I think probably a conversation group at church, if you don't have one, where you're talking about more of these specific kinds of psychological, emotional, spiritual concerns, where we can sit down, or whoever you would have here doing that, you really sit down and you get into individual stories. That's the only way we're going to be able to help the younger generation, is if we get into their individual stories. So I know that's not like a prescription you can take home. I wish I could provide that, but it's kind of the nature of what we're dealing with. So, okay, well, thank you all. I guess I probably went a little over here. No, yes, okay, yeah, but thank you again.
Thank you, and especially just as for this awareness, as we ourselves are God's creatures and part of creation. So feeling this tension and paying attention is helpful. Thanks.